Hello and welcome back to the Premier League Lowdown. This is the Game Week 11 review. I almost said preview then. And it's been another game week. It feels like every time we review, there's always plenty of stuff to talk about. It feels like this week, though, in particular, as a Liverpool fan, VAR was a hot topic. And I think it's something we'll get onto, but it is our last game. So let's kick it off then with Tottenham's 2-2 draw with Man United. And United have shown consistency this past month, and they've managed to pick up manager of the month in Ruben Amorim and player of the month in Brian Mbeumo, which I thought was a bit odd over Haaland, but they picked up the double. Was that deserved?
I think Amorim has definitely shown that he's turned this United side around, or starting to anyway. This is a big boat that was stuck in a very small river, and he's starting to turn them around very slowly. I do think Mbeumo has been a high quality player. I think maybe it's a case of the challenge with United is so much bigger. It's harder to score goals for this United side than it is for Man City. That's obvious. Maybe that's why he's got it. But I have to admit, his performances have been quality. He's been, probably United's best signing from this transfer window. So yeah, I definitely think Amorim is doing a good job. He has started at least to make United look like United again, and Mbeumo is definitely a key part of that.
What did you make of the game then? Because, again, it feels like Tottenham are always lacking that spark. Mind you, though, every goal in this game was really well taken. I thought Tell's turn, and although it took a deflection, still went top bins. And I thought Richarlison's goal was brilliant. As much as people say, oh, he's just getting in the way of it, but he must know himself that's going off target. So to just get a nick on it and redirect it back on target is almost instinct, as much as we give him a bit of grief. What did you make of the game?
I think both sides can be disappointed that they didn't get 3 points, because United were leading for the large majority of it, and Tottenham looked a bit all over the place at times. Really, they weren't as well composed as they were at the start of the season when we were praising Thomas Frank. This has been a bit of a blip under Frank with this Tottenham side, and I think then to take the lead in the dying minutes of the game is great. You think, wow, Tottenham have really taken control of the game, especially because they were so poor. And they were so poor again last week against Chelsea as well. To see them, take the lead, I was like, yes, this is great. But then, De Ligt again, who wasn't great in the game either, for him to get the winner, I think is a case of a lot of players for both teams kind of rescuing their performances in the dying minutes. I do think Richarlison, although his nickname is the Pigeon, isn't it? I think he runs around like a headless chicken because he's got no real striker's instinct for me. I don't think that he is a quality player, and I don't think he's the player that Spurs need to lead that line. To be honest, I thought that shot was going in before Richarlison puts his head on it. And even then, puts his head on it is a loose term for it kind of grazing over the top of his haircut. And it really makes me think, how many times is he going to rescue his performance in the Premier League with like a goal towards the end of a game that's not really his? Especially when Brazil in this World Cup coming up have got to pick somebody to lead their line, somebody to be that number 9 striker. Actually, in the Premier League at the moment, we've got like 3 or 4 really high quality Brazilian number 9s. You've got João Pedro, who we're going to talk about a bit later, who's absolutely firing for Chelsea, especially considering Cole Palmer's out. You've got Evan Nilsson for Bournemouth, who, okay, they've had a bit of a rocky one in the past couple of weeks, but he's still been quality. And then you've also got Igor Thiago, who makes Brentford 10 times better when he's on form. So I think Carlo Ancelotti's got a really difficult choice, and I'd be really disappointed if Richarlison is the player that they stick with, because he, like I said, he's not.
I think he's like Maguire or Pickford, though. He does turn up for his national team, I will say that. But right now, I think the 2 front runners are João Pedro and Igor Thiago.
Yeah, I just think he's not a clever pigeon. He's a headless chicken, and it pains me to watch him get a goal when Spurs maybe didn't deserve all 3 points. I think a draw is a fair result. I think both teams will look at that as an improvement from where they were last season. I mean, I don't think it's controversial to say the 2 teams that met this weekend are better than their Europa League final teams. I just think it's a case of a draw is a fair result. they'll both take it and move on to the international break.
Okay, then let's talk about Spurs a sec. I've kind of noticed whenever Thomas Frank puts a lineup out, there's always change to the side, like always 3 or 4 changes. Do you think those changes are hindering Spurs' success and almost chances of staying in Europe?
So Thomas Frank is still new to his role at Tottenham. Yes, he's been a Premier League manager for a number of years now, but he's yet to find perhaps his best team. And he's also going to have players coming back from injury. I mean, James Maddison is out for quite a long time, but he comes into this Spurs team and can make them better as well. And Dominic Solanke as well, like we said, we talk about so often how bad Richarlison is. Dominic Solanke's going to come back and make this team better. So I think it's a case of he's seen the injury worries that happened under Ange, and Thomas Frank's just trying to keep everything fresh. And actually, under a new manager, players, you don't have, the guarantees of I'm going to start every week. And he needs to keep that going. And I think he needs to keep experimenting, finding out what works. I just think at the moment, maybe those experiments aren't quite working out for him. And that's why, certainly against Chelsea, they were very poor. They were improved against United, but it's still not quite the finished article.
Do you think another case of that then is where obviously Thomas Frank was with Brentford, a team that doesn't have as much depth as a Tottenham team? Do you think he's almost spoilt for choice right now and he isn't understanding that maybe picking a more consistent lineup could be better for the squad's overall success then?
I think it's a case of, again, he's had a summer transfer window where he's brought in a couple of players. They're still trying to find their feet in some cases. Certainly, Xavi Simons hasn't looked quite like he has in other leagues around Europe. So I think it's a case of, again, this is still quite early doors. We're only maybe just under a third of the way through the season. And I think it's a case of finding what works for him. And I mean, in January, I wouldn't be surprised if he brought in some more players that are more similar to his, kind of his football. And that's when they'll get rid of some of the dead wood. I think maybe that's when players that don't quite, fit with his mesh. Certainly Jed Spence hasn't quite fitted personality-wise. And I know that Thomas Frank has a rule, he certainly had it at Brentford, where he doesn't want any knobheads basically in his team. And I think maybe a number of Tottenham players might be on the way out because of that rule, as they don't gel with how Thomas Frank wants to play.
Okay, then let's stay in London, but now we're going to be talking about West Ham getting another win. And this new manager bounce feels in full swing now. It started a bit slower, but they seem to almost taking what Nuno has been putting in front of them now. This could be a vital win come May, couldn't it?
Yeah, it's an absolute 6-pointer. It means that they're now level on points with Burnley, although they are still behind them. I mean, back-to-back wins at home and another comeback. It's certainly looking positive for West Ham. I don't think that they're anywhere near safe yet. And I think it'd be really difficult to say that they are, fixed in terms of what was broken before. I think Nuno has done well to kind of stabilise, but they certainly need new players in January, and they definitely need to just improve overall, because you can't still be conceding goals like they are. They were 1-0 down and they pulled it back to win the game, but they still conceded again late on. And really, Burnley could have made it 3-3. I'm not saying that they had the opportunities to, but if you lose from being in a winning position and after being in a losing position, I think, there's still work to be done for West Ham. They're not quite back, but it's looking better for them. And maybe sacking Graham Potter was the right decision.
And then you mentioned obviously going back into the transfer market and picking up a few players. Where do you think they'll be targeting on the pitch to sort of reinforce then?
So I think they needed a goalkeeper, to be honest, because signing Mads Hermansen and then dropping him was, it looks like an awful piece of business now, because I can't remember exactly the amount he was signed for. I think it was upwards of 20 million. And he doesn't even get a game anymore because he was so poor at the start. Alphonse Areola still making, mistakes that lead to Burnley goals. I think it's a case of maybe reinforcing in goal. You certainly can't be having Fabianski still turning out in goal well into his 40s for West Ham. And I also just think they need a bit more energy in the midfield. Malik Jufis looked like a really good signing on the left from Slavia Prague. Bowen is still basically doing most of the legwork up top. So I think there needs to be somebody in that midfield to still have the legs. And unfortunately, Thomas Suchek, although he scored on the weekend, I don't think he's got the legs to compete in Premier League football all the time. And that's certainly one of the positions that they need to sort out.
Okay, then we'll move on then to Everton versus Fulham. I thought Kieran Dewsbury Hall was key in this game, great at progressing the ball up the field and also on set pieces as well. I spoke before, God knows how many weeks ago, that Michael Keane could have had about 4 goals in one game just from his noggin alone. But Everton were dominant in this game and they had 3 disallowed goals as well. So they weren't stressed at all, really, were they?
No, they absolutely had chances. But again, we've spoken about it so many times. Tierno Barry is offside for at least 2 of them, I think. I don't think he's the right man to lead the line through in the centre.
He did get a round of applause off, didn't he? And he went on social media after and said thank you and understands his start to life in Merseyside hasn't been quite what it's been, though.
Yeah, I still think that in order to be those top level players, you have to hit the ground running straight away. There has to be some leniency, yes, because he is still quite young. I would love to see him absolutely tone up. I just think that if they continue playing him in that role, I mean, he had one of the goals disallowed as well, so he was looking for his first Premier League goal. I think Everton need him to perform, and at the moment he's not. So it's a case of do they go looking for somebody in January that is an out and out goal scorer, and they have Barry as one of those potential feeders? I think that would be a good idea. I do think that he does need to step up because he's had chances, he just hasn't taken them.
And okay, then you got Fulham now, and they really just have not got going. We are 11 games in, so almost a third of the way in. Should fans start to panic? Slash, are they in a relegation battle?
That I think that they've got too much quality in the games that the occasional wins that they snatch. But one win in 5 Premier League matches isn't good enough for a Fulham side that last season we were talking about potentially qualifying for Europe. They haven't had that investment to build on that. And I don't know. I don't think that Fulham should sack Marco Silva because I do think he is possibly the best manager that they're going to get at this point. But equally, if I'm Marco Silva and I've, with a limited budget, I've taken Fulham to, the brink of European football in a season where last season there were loads of teams competing for Europe that haven't been before, I would be looking for the door again and thinking, right, if I leave now for a club elsewhere that might be competing for something that's at that kind of European level, I've got a whole January transfer window that's mine. Whereas if I stay at Fulham, am I going to be financially backed? Probably not. And it's a very difficult choice of does he go with his head or his heart? And I think potentially Marco Silva should start thinking about leaving, really.
Leaving? What? We might have to clip that one up because I think that will get a lot of Fulham fans. I do agree with you, though. I think he's just like, he's almost punching, isn't he, really, with the club he's got. And I feel like if he did leave, you'd see a big team in France, Italy, or Spain come and swoop in for him because he has a really good philosophy about him. And I think if he had that better, say if he went to Spurs instead of Thomas Frank, I think he'd be doing that in that same sort of region that they are in now, almost like just on the edge of European football. But let's move on again to Sunderland versus Arsenal. Now this, for us Liverpool fans, was almost like a sliver of hope before the battering on Sunday evening. What did you think of the game? Because Sunderland, I thought, had the chances to win it late, but Arteta will be thanking Raya, who has been on form and comfortably the best goalie in the league for some time now, hasn't he?
I think he's got to be up there. I don't know whether he's the best, but he's definitely improved from even his time at Brentford, where he was a good goalkeeper. And I think he's definitely an improvement on Ramsdale. We've seen that from the fact that Ramsdale has gone and got however many relegations under his belt now. I think, David Raya is definitely a step up in the goalkeeping department. And it would not look out of place to see him have another Golden Glove and also be lifting the Premier League trophy because he does really reassure that entire Arsenal team. But so does their entire defence. And I think this game against Sunderland, Sunderland didn't look afraid of the game at home at the Stadium of Light. They absolutely took the game to Arsenal. Arsenal had the majority of the chances, but equally, when you take the lead early on, when you press them, this Arsenal defence struggled to cope with the kind of physicality of Sunderland. And that's how, certainly with the first goal, where they kind of pushed through and then it's volleyed in by Ballard. And then the second goal, Brian Brobby, who, by the way, forgotten wonder kid on FIFA. I did not realise he joined Sunderland. His name coming up on the score sheet was a bit surprising. But he kind of outstrengths the Arsenal defender to tap it in. And you're questioning, should that be allowed? If that's any other team other than Arsenal who have such a good defensive record, you're questioning the capability of that defender. But I think Sunderland absolutely deserved the point, and Arsenal will probably look at this as just a bit of a blip. But equally, after the international break, they've got the North London derby. So they've got to be looking at that as a chance to kind of mark out that this was a fluke. And I put a statement on the fact that actually, even against our rivals, we can dominate and win the game. They've got to be looking at that game, really hungry to prove themselves again.
Obviously, Arsenal have the quality up top to beat any team in the league, but Arteta has this obsession with playing Marino in the 9. Firstly, why do you think that is? And secondly, we've seen him now drop points because he's up top and he isn't just that natural striker. Do you think it would be better, say, he moved, say, a winger there, maybe moved Gabriel Martinelli inside and then played an additional winger like a Ethan Nwaneri?
Yeah, I mean, I think they've got the depth now in other areas of the pitch. I mean, Trossard is by no means their starting winger, and he scored a brilliant goal that could have been the winner really for them because he looked absolutely quality and the finish is superb. I think it is a case of maybe the Gyökeres sign was absolutely needed in the summer, but perhaps another backup striker would definitely help. And I think it's just a case of him, Arteta, rotating his side as much as he can to give the team the chance to win everything, really, which at the moment they don't look unlike being able to do. They definitely can win everything, I think, if they continue with this clean sheet record and having those players on the bench like Trossard to come out of the woodwork and score goals that can potentially win games. So I think he just is keen to keep that depth going because, like we say, I think that the biggest nightmare for Arsenal will be too many injuries derailing what has been a great start to the season. They need that depth, and I think it's a case of just keeping Gyökeres kind of fit and happy. And this game, although it nearly slipped away from them, I think they can afford to kind of run those risks. And maybe if Gyökeres starts, Sunderland don't have as much strength to fight back. Maybe they can't keep a handle on Gyökeres, and maybe it's a different result. But I think we can't take anything away from Sunderland. They absolutely deserve the point in this game.
Okay, then we'll move on to our 5th game, and this is also the 5th game with a London-based club in it. Feels like there's so many London-based teams in the league. Chelsea 3, Wolves 0. I thought Maresca's wingers were brilliant, especially Garnacho, who almost looks settled now, right, in that Chelsea shirt.
Yeah, I think he definitely fits their younger player model. I mean, Estevao is still a teenager. Joao Pedro's barely out of his teens. I think he's only in his early 20s as well. With Cole Palmer, who we would consider one of the more mature and sophisticated players, is only in his early 20s as well. So he definitely fits that model, and I think he's become more grounded at Chelsea, and that's helped. We're not hearing as much from him, which is helping him concentrate on his football. Whereas at United, it felt like every other week we were hearing something about Garnacho, and I think he's found his feet and in a youthful setup. But actually, I worry for Chelsea that actually having Palmer back might be a hindrance because they've been looked really free flowing at the moment, and they're maybe lacking that clinical touch. So it'll be really interesting when Palmer comes back. Will they actually become better than they are now, which would be saying something? Will they become more clinical and have that kind of finisher that can put games to bed? Or will this disrupt the kind of rhythm that they found without having Palmer in the squad? So I think that'll be a really interesting focal point of who gets dropped for Palmer and whether it actually benefits Chelsea in the long run.
You mentioned his name as well, Estevao. Feels like whenever he comes on as a super sub, he affects the game in a positive way, and he gets an assist. If my memory serves me correctly, do you think that's the best spot for him now, or should he? Do you think Maresca should be putting him in that starting lineup, or are they just him right now? I suppose Pedro Neto has also gone up a gear as well.
Yeah, I think it's best to be cautious, especially with players who are so young. And when Maresca's got an entire team of them, he's got a very careful balancing act. And I think, like I said, when Palmer comes back and you add more to that mix, I think it's worth making Esteval kind of earn that spot in the team. And he's also got to balance Champions League football as well. So there's a big balancing act. What you want to do is have a large group of players who are all in form and be spoilt for choice in that sense. And at the moment, Maresca is spoilt for choice in terms of his players. I mean, he has been even last season when they had players chaining in other gyms because down the road. So I think it's definitely important to be spoiled for choice like he is, and find those help those players find their feet gradually as opposed to rushing them in. And I think if Esteval gets rushed into this Chelsea squad too soon, we'll see all the good progress that he's made kind of go down the drain.
Okay, then let's talk about Wolves, because I thought they were shocking in this game. I felt like if they had all day to score a goal, I don't think they'd have scored one. And obviously, we've heard now Rob Edwards is coming in, and it feels like maybe they have a new chance to get a sort of definitive philosophy back in the club. And I think that was since last seen with Nuno, who obviously we know how well he done at Wolves. What do you think Rob Edwards will bring to this side?
I mean, you're absolutely right. They were very poor in that Chelsea game, but that's maybe to be expected once your manager's being sacked and actually you've got, I think it was the under-21s coach or whoever leading. But when Chelsea, are out shooting you 20 shots to 3 and they have 8 shots on target and you have none, you can't really argue with the result. I think the reason why Rob Edwards is going to be so important to Wolves is, yeah, you're right. He's going to bring in a bit more of a philosophy. He's still a relatively newish manager, but he's a former Wolves player, so he understands the club a bit better. But Gary Neville said it, and it pains me to agree with Gary Neville, but maybe Wolves are actually preparing for next season already, and they're just preparing for the Championship. You've brought in a manager who's taken Middlesbrough to, I think they're second in the table, and even then they've only become second in the game that he sat out. So they're, a top 4 kind of Championship club. You're definitely preparing for the season after, aren't you, if you hire a Championship manager? So I think maybe Wolves are looking ahead a bit to writing off this season. It'll be as bad as it will be. And maybe actually building up from the ground again, which is exactly what Nuno had to do in the Championship. He built up that squad and brought them back. So maybe this is a chance for Wolves to actually say, right, write this season off, end it now. We'll see you again in 2026, 2027.
Yeah, it kind of seems like dark days at the Molineux, but we'll move on to Leeds, who got handed a 3-1 defeat to Nottingham Forest. I guess it's a similar question to the West Ham result versus Burnley. A big win for Forest if they are in a supposed relegation battle, which I personally don't believe they are.
Yeah, I don't think that Forest will get dragged into a relegation battle. Having said that, this is only their second Premier League win of the season, and it's the first under Sean Dyche. But even when they signed Postecoglou, there was no progress there. Whereas now, at least, even though this is only Dyche's first Premier League win, we've seen progress in their European games and even in the games that they've kind of lost and drawn under Dyche. So I think this is a good sign, and it's definitely, an even bigger result to get that against a team that will probably be around the relegation zone, if not definitely in it. I think Leeds, I'm glad they started Metcha. That's exactly what I said that they should do last season. And last week. And then look at what happens. He scores a goal. But there's too many gaps in this Leeds squad, and Forest definitely, kind of picks them apart. Certainly between the defense and their attack, they were just waiting for the ball, queuing up and waiting for it. And I think that's kind of the undoing that Leeds faced. Whereas Forest were on form and certainly looking like they are getting back to somewhere near their best. but I don't think it's the finished article yet. But I wait and see what Dyche can do with a better squad, because we said it when he got appointed. This is probably the best team that he's ever managed. So it's really interesting to see now that he's not got so many financial restraints, how he can, guide this team on. Things are looking up for Forest fans, even though their season had a bit of a very slow start, under two different managers and then a third. So a slow start, but things are looking up.
Yeah, you've kind of knocked the two nails on the head. My next two questions. The first one was going to be like, have you been surprised with Dyche Ball? Because obviously we've seen a lot more of a rigid approach, and like you said, he's got a more talented squad. They're playing some really expansive football though, and Gibbs White looked back to that sort of young, hungry, and granted he is still young, but that younger, hungrier 10 that he was a couple years ago.
Yeah, I think, like we said, Dyche has kind of got free reign almost now compared to previously, when certainly at Burnley he was on a bit more of a shoestring budget, and the same at Everton, he didn't have quite as much freedom. Now he's got a manager he's got an owner who's a bit mental and willing to spend money, so it kind of helps that he is able to be a bit more expansive and put in tactics where actually Forest aren't always going to be on the back foot. Forest aren't always going to be the underdogs. They can take the game to teams, and they definitely did that against Leeds because they were the home team. And like I say, they saw the gaps and the weaknesses in this Leeds side, and they picked them apart at times. So it was really interesting to watch. Am I surprised by it? A little bit, because Dyche could have come in and played the exact same football that has worked for him at Burnley. But no, yeah, they look expansive, they look interesting, still putting crosses in, still getting big men to head of the ball in. So yeah, it's looking good.
And now, yeah, my next nail on the head was Nementia. Obviously, you said last week, and as soon as he scored, I literally, you should have been considered for the Wolves job. But obviously, you suggested that he comes in, he started, and he scored. Do you think Farker will continue to start him now? Because it feels like they've had no real ball up front who's just decided to go, yes, I deserve to be starting. Let me prove that I'm actually important to this team, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think it's obvious from Nemanja starting that maybe he's run out of patience with Dominic Calvert-Lewin, which, thank God, because I couldn't watch another Dominic Calvert-Lewin performance. But yeah, Nemanja, he's got a goal. This is, I think Leeds is his first open play goal for Leeds, because he had a penalty, I think, was it the opening day or one of the opening couple of matches? But Leeds have been crying out for a player. That first goal, they've been crying out for somebody to have an opportunity like that and to take one of those shots on. And it's actually a really intelligent striker's goal to put it across to put the shot across the goal through the legs of Neco Williams, who should have maybe gotten a bit closer. So I think it is a good sign, especially considering how poor Leeds have been going forwards. But it can't be the only good sign you have in the game. And what they've had recently is either their goalkeeper and their defence have been playing really well, and their attack hasn't, at which point they grind out a draw, or their attack plays really well, like in this Forest game, they get a goal. Maybe not all of their attacking play was great, but then defensively, and like I say, in midfield, too many gaps, too much space for players to almost walk through.
Okay, then, I guess what? We've got another London team, Crystal Palace, Brighton, 0-0. Two fairly matched teams, really. Both walked away with a point. I thought it was an end-to-end game. What did you make of it?
Yeah, it's always surprising, isn't it, when a 0-0 game is actually is actually really interesting to watch, and both teams could have had it. Both teams could have walked away with 3 points. I think a draw is going to be a fair result because they were both, like I say, on fire. Two really high-flying teams at the moment coming into the game, and yeah, absolutely end-to-end stuff, really. I will criticize one player, and that's Ruta, for the unbelievable dive, and which, yeah, he got a guard for, but he very nearly got away with it, and they very nearly got a penalty. Well, they did get a penalty, and it was taken away from them. But yeah, Ruta, outrageous dive. But yeah, both teams definitely could have won it. Kamada had one or two chances that he could have put away for Palace. I think Mateta had a chance or two as well. So a really interesting game that as a neutral you can watch and think this is actually really interesting. And I mean, Palace, that's their fifth clean sheet. They're only second to Arsenal now in terms of clean sheets. So although we talk a lot about Sarr and Mateta being incredibly fluid and great attackers, actually in defence, and certainly with Dean Henderson in goal, they look unbeatable sometimes. I'm going to spin the table on you then and ask, out of these two sides, like we say, high-flying teams, who do you think is going to finish higher in the Premier League come the end of it? Because at the moment, Palace are 10th with 17 points, and Brighton are just behind them in 11th on 16 points. Who do you think finishes higher?
I think it's got to be Palace. You mentioned the clean sheets, and I suppose when you are trying to climb the table naturally, which Palace are doing right now, so they're in a really good moment under Glasner. I think that's the key. And the other end to that is having a striker who can get those amounts of goals. And we've seen Mateta get near the 20 mark 2 years in a row now. And on the flip side of that, you've got Brighton who have Danny Welbeck. Yes, he's aged like fine wine, but he will never be more than that 10 goals he's ever eclipsed. So I think Crystal Palace, A, have a better squad right now, and B, have a better manager right now who can almost just galvanise the squad to push them higher up naturally. And then, okay, I'll turn the table back on you. Quite a bold question. For me personally, like Rutter's dive is disgusting, and it makes me not want to watch football when you see players constantly trying to cheat. I personally think players just see red for like sensationalized simulation, because all he's done is he's taken a heavy touch in an area and he's tried to win a penalty. Granted, say if it gets given and they walk away with a win, he's cheated and they've won. I just don't agree with it at all. Do you think that's a hot take? Like, what do you think? Do you think players should get more than a booking for diving? Because we're seeing it so much now where players are diving all the time because they know the ref's going to give it, aren't they?
I think it's got to be a fine line. I do still think that a yellow card is fair because it's still that kind of warning. And you're right. Upgrading it to a red would discourage it, and you would see less of it. But I don't think you'd be able to eliminate it completely. And at the moment, VAR has enough issues trying to deal with, genuine fouls and genuine challenges and separating them from, the challenges that actually aren't fouls and that are great challenges. I do agree it's a very poor decision to make for Ruta to dive like that. But like I say, VAR makes enough bad decisions. And actually, this decision in this game to not allow that penalty and to give that card is perhaps the only one that VAR got right this weekend. So I don't want to discredit VAR from making that decision and give them more to deal with. I do think a yellow card is fair, but you're right. There needs to be some kind of further discouragement from diving, whether that's an upgraded fine or more of a ban. But I think making it a red card in that individual game maybe overcomplicates things.
Yeah, maybe I'm just speaking from the heart because I just miss prime Barclays where players can actually just dive in and try win the ball. But we'll move on then to Brentford, who are I think they're kind of rightfully proving us both wrong. At the start of the year, we did say there was a lot of change and we don't think they're going to come out on the other side of it still in the Premier League. Right now, they are flying, comfortably beat Newcastle, who look a shadow of themselves. What did you make of the game?
Yeah, I mean, Harvey Barnes' opener is silky. The footwork to see two players down and finish it. Oh, it's so good. And there are those sparks in this Newcastle side that do kind of shine for them when they need. But to be sat in 14th when you were previously competing in the Champions League is quite poor. And I think that they really need to step up in some cases. I mean, in Newcastle, have got City after the international break at home, and given their performances recently, I wouldn't want to be, Eddie Howe and trying to come up with how you're going to stop them. But like you say, yeah, Brentford have absolutely proved loads of people wrong, and Keith Andrews as well has proved loads of people wrong. And Igor Thiago, we spoke about him earlier, definitely think he's got to be a shoo-in for that, Brazilian number 9, because he just scores such banger goals. Like I don't. It's very complicated to explain, but he looks like a pure number 9, and it's nice to see that back in the Premier League. Another long throw that they score from, and they also had a. This is what baffles me again. So we were talking about VAR. They had a penalty disallowed on Utara, which I definitely think was a penalty. But then they get given another one anyway, so it's fine. But it kind of, again, it puts me off that the VAR made the wrong decision in the first place.
And then was trying to correct it. Yeah.
Yeah. But again, both of them for me were fouls that should have been given as penalties. But yeah, a Dan Burn red card. Things are looking a bit worrying for this Newcastle side. I don't think that they're definitely too good to be, anywhere near the relegation battle. But
you think Howe will be put under pressure?
I think he's got to be. I think, Newcastle have stagnated, and it's not like they haven't seen investment come in. They've got however much money from the Isak deal. They've spent that on getting Waldemar in, who is quality. There's no doubts about that. So you can't say that they haven't spent money, kind of signing replacements and signing players, but they haven't done it in the right places. And like I say, I think they have stagnated under Howe, which is exactly what happened to Bournemouth as well. They stagnated once that growth wasn't quite up to standard, and they weren't necessarily reinventing themselves often enough. Yeah, they stagnate, and I think Newcastle might be at risk of being stuck if they stick with Howe too long. I've never rated him as a manager too much, so I do think they need to consider life after Eddie Howe.
Another bold claim. 2 managers walking in this episode, apparently, according to Alex.
Get him, Bill.
But another team who, almost like a shock defeat, was Bournemouth versus Aston Villa. 4-0 druthering. I thought Bournemouth just capitulated at Villa Park. They let one go and then all of their heads just collectively dropped. What were your thoughts in this game, especially considering Villa started off poorly and now they've turned a corner and have just gone full steam ahead, and they look well on for Europe now?
Yeah, I mean, again, Henry proven us wrong as well. We said it before, but he's completely proved us wrong in terms of pulling this Villa side back. I think the result against Liverpool last week was a bit of a fluke for Villa, where they kind of got a bit outplayed in that game. But in this one, they completely turned it on its head, and they completely outplayed Bournemouth. 4 goals, they absolutely ran right. Buendia steps up with an absolutely amazing direct free kick. Onana's outside of the box goal is quality as well. But Semenyo, has a penalty saved that, if he buries that, maybe they get back into the game. It's back-to-back losses for Bournemouth now, which, considering the start of the season they've had, is worrying. But again, when you consider the teams they've lost to, these title winners Liverpool, Manchester City, who are previous title winners, and then a high-flying Aston Villa who should win the Europa League, maybe it's not as bad as it seems. And actually, this is just a run of really difficult games that they find them in. I don't think they should be considering sacking their manager. So there you go. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt with Iraola. But they've got to be looking now to turn this around and say, actually, yeah, those results were a case of tough opposition and not getting it right on the day. And they need players like Semenyo to be back in form. I mean, Evan Nelson hit the bar in this game, so things aren't completely, away from where they need to be, and they definitely had chances. After the international break, they've got West Ham at home, so that is going to be an absolutely crucial opportunity to turn things around. And if they can hammer West Ham and just prove that, like I say, these results, these back-to-back losses, they're just a fluke. Things are actually all right on the South Coast. I think that's going to be key.
I think, okay, then let's go back to Villa then, who were brilliant. And Emery's just found this sort of way, even with Watkins out of form, to just find goals down other avenues. And I think one player in particular, Onana, he's almost been given that license to go further upfield, be more involved with the output going forward, similar to his sort of Everton days. Do you think he's the sort of main player who's stepped up? Have there been any other players as to why Villa are sort of coming out of this sort of rut that they had at the start of the year?
I think for me, Buendia has been the one that I've looked at as being kind of crucial to their turnaround. He's been really good. And Morgan Rogers, I mean, we know how good he is from recent seasons anyway, but he also, even when Villa were poor against Liverpool, he didn't look bad in that game. He was their shining light in that game. So I think those two have definitely stepped up. And you're right, Onana looks quality as well. I really wouldn't be surprised if he got a move to a big Champions League team if Villa don't perhaps win something this season, because he does look really quality. And I definitely think he's, a £70 million player that Villa will look at. And, if a club offers that kind of money, they'd be silly not to take it, because he is so good. But that money will really help them as well in the long term. But yeah, those are Buendia, Rogers, and Onana are definitely up there. And I still think Watkins needs to work on something to find his way out. Otherwise, Villa will they'll kind of be forced into signing another striker in January, because although they've got players teaming up to help them out, they need somebody to finish some of these chances when they do come up against tougher opposition. And if Watkins still isn't firing, they're going to need somebody to maybe put more pressure on him, because at the moment, I don't think there's really another striker in this Villa side where I'd look at that and be like, oh, yeah, if I'm Watkins, I'm shaking my boots because he's going to steal me spot. I don't think that player.
But you can already see the headlines, though, of Watkins being out of form, Villa signing a striker, and then Watkins going, I'm unhappy, I want to move. It almost just seems like written on the wall already.
Yeah, and I mean, he wanted the move to Arsenal, didn't he? And I wonder if actually maybe that's still on the cards for January. We spoke earlier about, obviously, then Arsenal playing Marino as the backup. Watkins won't be happy to go into any club and be a backup player. But if he wants that dream move to Arsenal and he wants to be in contention for playing in the England squad in the summer, maybe that move is still on the cards and still something that he should pursue. Because if you're part of a Premier League winning squad, which he very may possibly be at Arsenal, then that kind of is a no-brainer. Whereas Villa still get a hefty chunk of change for him and can bring in somebody as a striker. What they should have done is not sold John Duran, to be honest, but that's in the past.
Hindsight is a beautiful thing. And that is the end of the episode. We won't be talking about the final game.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine by me. We'll skip the Liverpool one, yeah.
No, I think we have to, because it was a shocking performance. I mean, I fully deserve it for City, really. They were unlucky to only walk away winning 3-0. We were second best in every aspect of the pitch. And again, it's the same old story, really. Liverpool playing bad, but Szoboszlai being like the only one who almost wants to change what's going on for Liverpool. What do you think? What went wrong for the Reds? And also, how good was Doku? Because Conor Bradley kept Vinicius Jr. as quiet as a mouse midweek, and then he gets ripped to shreds by Doku.
I thought Bradley did quite well against Doku, considering, but he was juggling a million different things, and actually he's trying to cover for a rub-centered right-sided centre back, in Konate, who was poor again. It's yet another poor performance from Konate, and I question how long he's got in a Liverpool shirt with his contract expiring, Real Madrid sniffing around him, and Mark Gahey potentially coming in. I think it was telling that City put so much pressure on Van Dijk and made Konate our only outlet, because every time he gets on ball, he looks error-prone and poor. And I think that's kind of, if there was a better right-sided centre-back, I think Bradley can deal with Doku in that sense, and he's not doing too much. I do think that City outplayed us. I don't think that there's any doubt about that. They were literally walking through our defence at times, playing some really prime Pep Guardiola football in his 1,000th game as manager. They were just walking through our team and breaking through that press. However, I do think that the game completely changes if our equaliser that didn't happen counts, because Robertson isn't in the way of Donnarumma's eyesight. That should have stood as a goal. I also don't think their penalty should have been a penalty, but we'll move on from that. But yeah, no, if that equaliser counts, the game is completely changed on its head, and I think Liverpool grow in confidence. But again, yeah, very poor overall, and very surprising given the two performances prior to that, because against Villa, we outplayed them. Real Madrid, again, we played off the pitch. But in this game, even though they'd had 5 days of rest, the team looked leggy and tired. And like I say, City walked through us. So I think another international break coming up now. I don't think the club is in crisis, but that next game is Forest at home, I believe, and that's going to be a tricky game against this Sean Dyche side. So I want to see us smothering teams again with the press. Whereas in this game against City, instead of being the smotheries, no, instead of being the smotherers, we were the smotheries. And yeah, they completely dominated the game. And Doku looked quality, yes, but I think it would be unfair to Conor Bradley to say that he walked over him. It was Ibrahim Konate's fault that Doku looked so good.
Yeah, I think we just have to give credit to Pep, who understood straight away if we press Haaland on Van Dijk, but arguably the best ball playing centre half in the league, and we give it to someone who never wants to play that progressive pass, always just play it back to Van Dijk to make that progressive ball, then we're going to cause issues. And it was like in the first 20 minutes, you saw Konate got the ball from Mamadashvili, who then played it to Gravenberch, who spun out on the byline, and then he had like 3 City players on him. And then what's he got to do? Just pump it up the line to Mo Salah, who can never beat anyone physically, let alone an informed left back who's towering over him at 6'3". So it almost just felt like Pep had Arne Slot's number this time. And it was interesting because coming into this, Slot had beaten City to both games last year. So it almost felt like Liverpool had the upper hand. And it almost seems like we're just too cocky, aren't we? All the players come in after, say, these 2 good results against Villa and Real Madrid, and then just think they're going to walk over this City team who have looked really good, and particularly Haaland, who's got a great header.
Yeah, I've got it absolutely right in terms of outnumbering our midfield as well. If teams play 5 players in midfield and outnumber us, those 3 in midfield who last season were arguably the best midfielders, that midfield trio of Gravenberch, Szoboszlai and McAllister, if you outnumber them and they've got nowhere to go, which is exactly what happened, then they look overrun. And being overrun in midfield really slows any kind of movement that Liverpool have down. I do think it means that we're probably out of the title race, but that's absolutely fine. There are other competitions. And maybe, like we've said in the past, this is the transition season still. There's no need to get ahead of ourselves in terms of saying that this is a crisis. But I do think that, City are going to be the only ones who can stop Arsenal. And they do look back to their best. And maybe this is time for that relentless City machine to kick on. So I'd be interested to see how City perform in the next couple of weeks. I mean, like we said, Newcastle is their next game. So Newcastle away, difficult place to go, but an out of form Newcastle side. I think they'll be hoping that this is their title race kind of starting podium. Yeah.
So right now it's 4 points difference between Arsenal and City. I suppose I pose the question, can they do it? Can they claw back? But we've seen before, particularly against us when we were however many points ahead, that they came back and won it. Do you think it's out of the question, or do you think it is like both teams are fairly matched up to win the league?
Now Arsenal are going to be looking over their shoulder, or should be looking over their shoulder at every possibility, because this City team can be a relentless machine under Pep Guardiola in terms of churning out results. And normally we see that come Easter time, but actually already they've had a bit of a slower start to the season, but can turn out results. So it'll be interesting to see how Arsenal handle the pressure of being chased now, as opposed to being the ones that are chasing. And if City can roll back the years and produce something, which I have no doubts that Pep Guardiola will be confident that his team can do it.
So all these Liverpool haters finally got what they want, us admitting that we're probably not going to win the league this year, as much as I came into it and said it's going to be wrapped up by like January. Yeah. But that is pretty much everything covered over the weekend. So we hope everyone enjoyed the sort of topics we covered. I thought we covered everything pretty fairly there. And I suppose what we'll be looking into these next sort of couple episodes will be some more fun stuff. I know me and Alex, you'll have to stay tuned for a bold 11 which should be quite good. And the other two are discussing their current team of the season. So plenty of fun, more unique stuff coming along the way. So thanks for listening, everyone. Take care. Bye bye.